Hello everyone. Welcome to the 36th webinar in 12D's training webinar series. My name is Lisa Stewart and I'm the Marketing and Communications Coordinator here at 12D Solutions. 12D's training webinars showcase common industry challenges, taking a close look at industry best practices and how these can be implemented using 12D products. The aim of these webinars is to upskill 12D users and broaden their understanding of the capabilities of 12D products. We run these webinars regularly and record them for posting through our website and on YouTube. The previous 35 webinars from this training series, as well as the 31 webinars from our Industry Solutions series, are available on our YouTube channels if you missed those. During this live presentation, you'll be able to type your questions along the way. We'll put some instructions on the screen, and we'll answer as many as possible of those throughout the webinar. Then at the end, I'll read out some of your questions to the presenter for his insights if there's time. Today's webinar on pad and lot grading will be presented by Peter Tainton, who has over 20 years of experience in various facets of road design. He's been engaged in large projects for several major councils and government road authorities. Over the last 16 years, he has worked closely with our programmers in the implementation of a variety of design features within 12D Model. During today's webinar, we'll look at the grading of lots and their relationship with road design strings and design existing supertims. Options to be covered include location of pad from property boundaries, setting of corner heights and/or applying a slope grade along a pad edge. We'll also touch on referencing one pad to another to determine where batter slopes may impact on the adjacent pad and on planar surface grading. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Lisa. So as Lisa said, today's presentation is on pad design within 12D. The pads are easy to create and also easy to edit. We look at the create pads. We're going to set the pads by height in relation to a typed input, height from a tin surface, and that tin surface can be a super tin, height from a footpath string that the pad might be adjacent to, and slope from a footpath string. So the pad leveling and grading in relation to an adjacent pad is fairly important when you're trying to set up each pad for heights of retaining walls and different sorts of earthworks. So we're going to also transition the pad from the pad platform to the footpath. Rather than just having a pad sitting up in the air, we need to do that transition. We're going to look at the triangulation of the pads and sectioning for driveways. We're also going to look at a pad pond design. In 12D, the pad pond design is a function, so it can be recalced and run inside a chain. The pad function has cut and fill slopes, allows an internal model to be added to the pond or the pad. If it's a pond, it can have water calculations and triangulation, and has an auto calculation for an outfall point from the pond. And you also can do the obvious volumes. So we're into 12D, so before we get started on the final design shown on the screen, we'll have to look at how we created these pads in the first place. So under the toolbar, the pads are under design pads, but it's also a toolbar available under view toolbars. So look at the pad create option. There's already a couple of pads here created that we're going to use later on, and you'll notice the type of display that's shown for the pads when they get created. So the pads are created in a clockwise direction, and the colours assigned to how many sides you end up with are just the incremental colour numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Red, green, blue and cyan. So how this fonts, what sort of fonts and colours that you're going to use for the pad is under the display button. So you can go to display and it tells you number of displays you might want to show for levels, grades, the arrow size showing which direction the grade is going. The textile data for levels, we can edit that. We can set up some information about the text. In this case here, it's talking about the level at the corner. So there is an offset of 1 metre. You can use negative and positive to position the levels. The same for the grade. You can actually set up a pad texture. So again, if you want to be able to give these pads a viz type pad texture like grass or concrete or sand, whatever, you can do that. When you go set or change anything on those display defaults, it saves a file called super_allotment_create_edit.def. That file is saved in your project directory, not your working directory, in your actual .project directory. And if that's something you want to use all the time for office standards and so forth, and presentations, you can then copy that file into your user area, and next time you start the project, it will find that those information for you in that folder. So let's look at the pad creation to start with. So it's actually for a boundary data source. So generally it's your lot. So most times people have got a lot creation. You can create extra strings to form boundaries and things like that, and then you would select by possibly model or even view. But offsets for the boundaries can be created on this panel as well. So we're looking at a model, our design pads, color of the pad. Color of the pad doesn't make that much difference in relation to what it looks like on the screen, but it is used if you then triangulate the pads and you do coloration by polygon. That's the color that's used to color the pads themselves. So look at the pad. This might be lot number 2, and this is the lot we're looking at. I go into offsets, so that we can have a global offset for the pad. That means it'll be 1 meter offset for all these boundaries, unless you do something else. You can create individual boundary offsets. In that case, I might go segment. So I go select. I pick the direction. That means you hold your cursor down, move along the string a little bit, release, and then type in a value of 3 meters. So you always pick in that in the direction where the offset would be positive on the right-hand side. You can not only pick the segment from point to point, but sometimes you may want to cut a corner where you don't want the segments for the block. So you can change that to point, and I can pick a point from here to there, and again put in my offset, and it creates these temporary models. These strings are used when you go to create the pad, but they're not saved unless you actually put an offset model in here. We go to the creation. So the pad itself has different ways of creating the pad. So we'll just start off by a typed input. So we'll just say 20 meters. So we're just doing the one pad. So it asks you to pick the centroid of the pad. So just somewhere in the middle, but it's not important that it's exactly the centroid. You go accept. It just drags out a graphical on-screen circle, just so you can get an idea you are encompassing the block you're interested in. And then you go process. So it creates the pad. So these creation methods are working on the centroid point that you picked. So it's not at the edit pad stage, it's at the pad creation stage. The level taken from the typed input is from this point. But I can change my option to say use a tin level instead. And I've got a tin here, which is my final surface. It'll still use the coordinate I picked here, and at the moment it's RL20. So if I go process, it's now RL24.65, which would be the level dropped onto the tin surface at that centroid point that you picked. As I said, it's only just leveling the pad at that position for you. It's not grading at all and changing all the corner points. That's all part of the edit process. So I then can look at the other option. I can say use boundary height. So in this case here, I might say I want to be 1 meter above my footpath design boundary here. This one allows you to put in a slope on the boundary sides. And so when I pick the boundary and I go process, it then uses the level on your string out here and then adds 1 meter to it for the level of the pad. And this time it's allowed you to put in at least a starting grade on the sides of the pad. So the other option is very similar. It's a boundary slope. So again, you might say I want to be 1 in 4, and the sides as a pad, and I select my boundary, and again, process. So that's taken the point from here, gone at a 1 in 6 slope up to the point that you picked in the middle. As I said, don't be too worried about that. It's normally the points you pick 1 in 6 from to the corner of the blocks, and that again is all part of the editing process. So doing creating the pad and those sorts of things one at a time would be a bit of a challenge for a large subdivision site. So you can actually draw strings that through the centroid points of the blocks and join them up, and it will then allow you to do a longer string option for the pad. All the same things here all apply. It's just that it will do it multiple pads. So the string is just drawn. The points here are just shown, dropped into the center of the block, just a normal super string. So I go into my offsets again. I'm going to use a global offset, and I'm also going to still pick the string-to-string points. So I'm picking a point from there to there, and my offset is 3 meters, and I'm going to go from here to there, and 3 meters. So again, you do the same process as you did before. With the advent of the versions of Control-Z, since these pad macros were created, we had a auto hide of our panels, and that was just to give you better screen space and things like that. But in this case here, I would like to have the user read some of the message boxes that come up here. So if it does auto hide, you probably don't want to turn that off in your environment file, but you can. But you can just bring the panel up once you pick something. Once you get used to using the option, you know what to pick. So going to creation, so I turn around and I might just say I want to use tin level, I want a surface level. So instead of doing single, I go along a string. I select the string that I created and process. So it creates the pads for me. So again, that's the general idea for the pads themselves. And again, each pad can be edited and, afterwards, and you can delete points and things like that for the pad itself. So if I do, that's the pad creation part. And again, it's you could have drawn a string all the way through every single block here, and it would have at least got you a start point for the pads. The editing of the pads is a single pad process because each pad can be quite complicated. It can interface with pads next to it, different grades on each pad. So it's pretty hard to come up with a global thing that will edit all the pads at one occurrence. So I go to the edit part. So one of the things that can be globally done is at least the display type. So if I turn around and say I want that to be grass, and I then pick the pad, it'll then display the pad with a texture and not all the heavy line work over here, but you can still see the actual text. But it is a solid fill, so when you pick on the pad, it does highlight the whole thing rather than just the side. So for instance, if you did want that to be the same for all the pads, you could then simply just go and grab the model you wanted to and go process. So as it says here, there's no undo for these sorts of things. So again, you have to go back to the display here and say I want none, and then go back to global and process. So we'll have a look at the pad edits, but before we do that, we'll look at some of the pads. These ones are created by the pad option, but there are times when you do bring in or have imported some strings that represent where the pads are going to be, and that's just simply a matter of now picking that particular string, and it will automatically convert it to a pad for you. It won't have any smarts associated with offsets or anything from the boundary, but at least we'll be ready to edit. So when I drop to my grading option, I can simply go for this pad here, level entire pad, pick the corner of the pad, and type in a level for that pad. So you can actually then use existing strings rather than have to create the pad, but you do lose a lot of the functionality on the creation. So we look at the offsets. So again, we can do the global displays. This is all part of the edit options. So I can select the pad. like so, and I can make that 2 meters. It will then change the offset for me because this pad was created by the create option. We'll have a look at some of those grade changes later on when we look at the interaction between two pads. We'll just have a look at some of the grading options. So here's my pad here. Before, when I was creating the pad, again, it was all related to the center. Now we can look at each individual corner and each individual side to allow grading. So we saw a level entire pad, which is straightforward. Pick a point and type in a level, and the pad will be flat at that particular level that you've entered. We can level and or grade. So again, if you bring this up again, it just says select pad corner or edge. So again, if I grab that corner there and I change that to 25, right, it now changes the level, and obviously then the grade text on the side changes and shows you which way the grade's going downhill. So that's how you change levels on the corners of the block. Same option does pad edges. So you pick the direction, just like we did with the boundary offset before. We hold our cursor down, we move away from the controlling point. So I drag my cursor along here, release and accept, and I say -100. That means I want to go down from that point. So this point will be lower. If this is still the controlling point, but I want to go up, I pick the direction away from that point, type in 100, and the grade here, the point here is now higher, but the grade shows going down. Rather than having to show negatives and things like that, it was easy to just show which way is down. So do some of the easy ones first. So the surface grading, I'll pick a point here. So this just does a planar grading across the pad. It's normally just a graphical representation, but if you do want to snap onto a particular point, like the corner of the pad, you can use your Snaps CAD right mouse button, point, and you can snap onto that point and then type in a grade, drag out a circle, which just basically defines where that pad is again, just more of a visual type thing. And it will then do a planar grade and then be flat across to the other points. So quite good for doing those surface grading options. We can look at a raising and lowering the pad. So therefore you go pick height, which allows you to pick the pad string, and you just simply just go up and down. So the idea behind that was rather than having to type in a minus or a plus value, you just simply go up and down, and that will do that calculation for you. The pad itself, there's a level by string and height. So again, if I then bring this up, it's saying select your height reference string. So that'll be my footpath string over here. So the string runs all the way along here, one continuous string. So I pick that. It says what height do I want to be. I want to be 2 meters above the string. So now it's asking you to pick points that you wish to set 2 meters above the footpath. So I can pick that point, and I pick that point, and then now these 2 points are now 2 meters above the footpath string. The level by segment and slope basically works exactly the same way. Pick your string, whatever slope you want, 1 in 6, pick the corner, pick that corner, and then change that to 1 in 6. So if you're looking at these options here, these level by, so if you're doing level by string and height, you may like where this pad is at the moment, and you want to make it 2 meters above the footpath, but it would be like the way it's graded. So you just want to lift the entire pad up, but in relation to this point being 2 meters above there. So when you go level by string and height, you can tick this box on. So every level by option above, level by here, those 4, relates to the entire pad shift. So if I go level by string height now, I pick my footpath, so I want to be 1 meter above, and I pick the point. It then raises the pad to the level, but keeps the orientation of the slopes and everything the same, and the same for the slope one here. So we just turn that off. You don't always want that on. So these is some information to do pad interfacing with pads in this case. So again, we're looking at the pad string before, when there's also a segment one. So in this case here, the pad segment here is shorter than the one next to it. So if we use the string option and we wanted to level this pad in relation to this one, then it would only just adopt the levels on the end of the string. It wouldn't be able to extrapolate this or extend this grade along and then produce the height of this pad. So that's what the segment ones allow you to do. So in that case here, if I go level by segment and height rather than string, again, if I pick my thing, it's going to turn around and say, what's my height reference string? That one there. What height difference do I want to be? I want to be 2 meters, and ask me to pick a point, and pick a point. So by doing that, the grades are now the same because it's taken this segment, extended or extrapolated down to there before it's done the drop down to get the extra 2 meters. So this is actually, the whole string here is 2 meters above that side of the down pad. So it's just a good way of doing it rather than relying on just the string part. So the segment's normally good for or associated with the pad interface to pad. There's also a batter slope here. So again, if I pick the edge of the pad, so in this case here, it's going to do a interface down to this pad below to try and work out where that slope may hit that pad and whether it's worthwhile following up, because you may lose a lot more of the pad than what you would like. So when you pick the direction, so the slope is on the right hand side, you say -4, and then you pick the pad. It'll turn around and then work out where that slope's going to fall. So it's only a visual thing at this stage. So if I go to my section view here and I add in a drag model, it's just a temporary drag model that I use in the pad creation. It gets deleted once you finish, but it'll show you the 1 in 4 slope interfacing with that pad. So the idea is you come back and you say, look, I mightn't like that. I might stick to 1 in 2 instead of 1 in 4. So again, I go back, pick with direction. So there's the slopes on the right-hand side. I say -2, enter, pick the pad, and it shows the 1 in 2 slope. So that's all okay, but every time I go and create another command, this all disappears. So if you want to be able to use that string to reshape this pad now, knowing that it's 1 in 2 away from that pad, you can then put in a model for the batter slope. So now when you go and pick this, pick the direction, say -2, pick the edge, it then creates a model on offset but retains that string for you. So now you're able to go to the offset part and say, look, I want to be able to change the edge of this pad to match this one now. So we can do that using the new boundary option. So there's an option there to say, do you want to maintain the level? In other words, the grade would change, or do you want to maintain the level and on grade? So if I go and pick the boundary, so again, it's going to ask you to pick the edge of pad. So you're going to pick this pad, so you always pick in a clockwise direction. That's the way it was created. And you pick this one in a clockwise direction. And it then assigns that edge to the new pad that maintains the grade on either side. We initially created this pad with a 1 meter offset as a global offset. So if we don't want, it still maintains that 1 meter, but if you don't want that, you can simply just go and pick the pad and change that to 0, and the pad will line up with that. So it's good little edits and knowing how to relate one pad to the other without physically having to apply minis and do all sorts of tin interface triangulations and all those sorts of things. So we've looked at our edit pads and our creations. So we'll look at how I'm going to then relate the pad to the footpath scenarios. Okay, so I've got this. So this is created the same way. I've just added the viz houses on just to make it look a little bit pretty for you. So that's under, for people that may not know, you need the visualization module, obviously. But under view, visualization, and then I've got houses. So you can place houses and things like that, and it'll bring those houses in for you. So if you do, when you place them, you just give an X, Y, Z level and an orientation. If you get the orientation wrong, you can just go undo and then re-enter the orientation. Don't take too long to position the houses. So part of this process is to not only to get the pads, but also to be able to monitor its tie-in with the existing footpath. So you want to be able to see this retaining wall between the two pads, and then see it come out to the footpath, and then be able to then model this pad here, going from a upward slope to a downward slope and transitioning to match into the footpath nicely. So you also want to be able to then check using 2-point cross sections and things like that, profiles, sections through here to see that your driveway will get out, and that for drainage of the pad and so forth. So that's what we're going to look at the moment. If I look at my final design here, the final design is made up of a lot of pads and things like that. There's also even a driveway done here using the pad option with all the grading. If we look at our pad, it's just got the texture turned on for the driveway. So if I turn around and say that to none and pick the driveway, you'll see that it actually has grading as well. So we just use the pad option to do that. So I'm going to look at the lot number 2 next to these pads that I've already created. So we're going to go into our create option again, select the model of the boundaries. The model of the pads is the same as these ones. The color again, and we're just doing lot number 2 again. Right, again for the offsets, and these ones are close together, so we're looking at a retaining wall possibly. So the offsets from the boundary wall between the two pads created might only be 100 millimeters, a near vertical wall. So you can have an offset as small as that. Again, I can pick my offset for my boundary. So within that distance here, this is where the transitioning for the pad is going to happen. So if I go into my creation, my typed input, I just make that tin level will do. Final surface. Again, pick my point and drag out my pad. Process. Right, so if I go back and look at this option, I'm using the favorites here to go to a new pad view. Again, you can go to North View and so forth. They're all just under the, if you didn't know, they're all under this yellow star. Create save positions and save positions plus models. So I'm just interested in my new pad position. So I'm doing this because we're going to do a lot of the picking and editing of the tie-ins in the perspective view. One of the advents of version 12 is the ability to be able to pick and highlight points in the perspective view. Before it was a little bit hard. So if I got my my new pad here, you can just see that faint blue line. So if I simply just go and recalc a chain, it then goes and redoes the pad for me. So obviously this is just a simple chain set up for the demonstration, but the chain looks like this. It's quite easy. So I've got a triangulation that's triangulating the pads themselves, and also these interfaces that I've already done. So they're on separate models. So it recalcs the design tin. When you use the design pads in triangulation, they are just normally just points at each corner, so they can be quite a distance between each points on the sides. So you need to set an interval for those that superstring, similar to the super alignments. So when you do use it in triangulation, it has sample intervals along that edge. So that's a part of an option here. It's just change superstrings, and it's just simply under utility superstrings. And I'm just setting the interval to 1 meter. We are looking at some updates in version 14, and one of those will be the automatic setting of the interval in case you triangulate, or when you triangulate the pads. Then it's just coloring. So it's just simply coloring the triangulation with these models, and it's also coloring some other for the pads. So the overall tin is this wall type color, and the rest is just colored using simple options inside 12D, just color and polygon. So not too hard. It just makes it a lot easier to just update and see what we're doing. So I go back to my pad, and I'm looking to say it's got to be a little bit different. This it's got to have some sort of fall. So again, I go into my edit, grading, and I'm looking at and or grade, level and grade there. So I'll make that say minus 100, fairly standard sort of fall. So I'm looking at the pad now, say, okay, that's not too bad. I'll go back and run this again. Then updates the pad, so the pad's fallen this way. It looks a bit high because you've got to be able to get the pad, as with these pads here, to transition roughly halfway across to go from falling away from the footpath to falling out from the footpath. And this all can get a bit tricky depending on how steep this road is. So I'm just going to raise the pad. So I just go 0.1, I pick the pad. As you see, I'm picking it all from the section view, and simply just go up. So just up the pad like that. That may be close enough. You can always check later on with your cross-sectioning and profiling, but we'll just adopt that. So again, I run the pad, the chain, and it then updates the pad. So again, if I look at just one more option there, and again, run the pad, run the chain. So now I go sort of think I'm pretty happy with where the pad's sitting. I want to see how I can then transition it from there out to the footpath. So we use that by using the normal CAD string. So I've got a model for this little triangle that represents the extension of the wall, and then a model for the footpath transition. So we'll just do the wall first. So I'll simply go into the create polygon by freehand, turn my line snap off, and I can snap onto the one that's already been created, onto the top of the other pad, the bottom of the pad I just created, and it creates that little triangle for me. So again, if I now run that pad, it then is part of the triangulation, so obviously it then updates, and that's the transition of the wall down to nothing. I can then change the model to the footpath transition now, and again go and grab the pad picking all from the perspective view. So I want that point, I want to pick the pad, and I want to pick the footpath over here. So again, it's now done that transition for me, joined that path from one to the other. And again, if I run the chain, it now then updates and does the transition for me. So it's a simple little process. And again, doesn't take long to be able to then section, do some 2-point sections between the pad. And obviously you're in this situation, a lot of these close pads or close blocks, you'll end up having to put possibly a driveway on this side here because of the stepping. So it allows you to edit the pad and just simply having the chain option running. You can obviously then convert like we did with the pad string before that was imported. You could pick this string here and convert it to a pad, and which then would allow you to edit these strings with the pad option rather than using the CAD toolbars. But the CAD toolbars are quite good, and picking in the perspective view does help. Through the south view of this job, so again we're looking at how not only does the pads interact with each other, but how they all interact with other pads. So again, we're looking at a wall, vertical wall between these pads. So we go back to our design final. So we're going to look at the creation of more than one pad, similar to what we did before, but just a few different offsets. So again, we're going to go create pad. Same process. And we're going to look at the same model. So when we triangulate, they're all in the same triangulation. Again, the color. Offsets, again, 0.05 for the wall. And we're going to put in some point-to-point options. So I'm going to select from there to there. Say 3 meters, wherever it may be. And again, 3 meters. So again, I want to be able to then look at the creation like we did before. I'm not going to grade all these pads, but just going to use a 10 level and just say final surface along a string. So again, if we update our chain, we've now got that sort of thing happening. So again, we haven't done the transitions like we did over here to the footpath, but at the back of the lots, all the having the offset of 50 millimeters, it then all just triangulates nicely between those points. So again, it's just an easy way of being able to create the pads. So we look back in our north view, and this tin I keep on running in the chain is just a super tin, just called combined. So it has the final surface, the pads in there. It also has the driveway. So if I add the driveway in and update, we've now got the driveway over here. So if I now looked at, that's the one that I showed before where we turned the shade or the texture on and off. So it's also used the pad option to grade the actual driveway. So some of the other options besides the pad creation, doing driveways and things like that, we can have a look at a pad pond option. So in this particular case here, the pad pond strings are drawn here. So this one's a pond, but the same process, this dynamic one, can be used for a pad, and has a lot more other features than what the normal pad create and edit options have. So here we've got a string that represents the bottom of a pond, and we're going to do a normal sort of interface up that you would traditionally go through the design interface command or even an apply menu. So if we look at the dynamic pad pond, and we'll just go and grab one we prepared before. So basically, we're looking at the pond, and we've got our cut and fill slope specified, section separation, very similar to the interface options, a tin, a model for the string created, a model for the tin, and so forth. So if I go to process, it'll then give me a cut. There's no fill in this case. So if I go to my final there, and I'll go up under my edit super tin again, and we'll add in that model called, the tin called pond, and update. So that's the sort of thing it's doing. So you may think it's not much different than the interface command, but it then allows you to add in an internal model for this particular pond. So there may have been an island or a berm around the outside of here that's as well as the normal interface out to the existing. So you can add in an extra model. So there's an extra model here. I can go process, my update. It will then take into account those internal strings as part of the surface, triangulate those, not just the flat bottom, and then obviously give you volumes to that. The pad pond function can also create a water surface for you. There's an option here to if it's in normally a cut situation like this, you can automatically find out what the lowest point is by simply just ticking on that box. And it calculates the lowest outflow point for you. So I go process, and now it gives me a capacity here. So if I add in the pond water, it now has a water surface at that outlet, the lowest outlet on that cut batter for the actual pond. So you can raise the water level up and down. You can change the water level here and keep on running the option. So this dynamic pad pond does have those extra features, more so than what the normal interface command would have. It also has an extra feature here to calculate the storage to an existing tin surface. So in that case, when you're just got a triangulation, rather than just a job like this, more of a survey pickup and so forth, you can simply bring up the pad option and tick on this box here, which just says I'm going to, what's your existing tin, doesn't do anything else. What's the existing tin, name of the water surface that you're going to create, and the level. So it will then work its way through the triangulation that you have and create interface where that happens and create the water surface for you. So it's quite a handle option, just working on the existing tin. So for the pad creation, as I said, it's not a difficult process. It's just learning the tools in relation to the pads, how they interact with each other, and strings, and being able to edit and also work out a way to be able to interface with the existing. This is just a process that I adopted, and it seems to work quite well. So just about brings it into the pad. It wasn't a very long webinar for you, but as I said, it's a very simple options, and makes it quite easy to create and edit pads. As I said, if you're out there thinking about what I can do, what I can create for my particular pads, they're just a surface. So if you do have a large surface, and you may end up having to create a pad through there and a line through here and have 4 pads or whatever, and just edit each one. At the moment, we have no set one, so if you change one, the others automatically update, but you never know, there might be something in the future. So I'd like to thank you all for coming, and hand over to Lisa if there's any questions.
Thanks, Peter. I think we've just got time to do a couple of questions here that have come through. Ben has asked, what would be the process for creating a building pad with 2 levels, so a step in the pad?
Yeah, as I just mentioned then, I must have preempted you, Ben. Was that you just have to create the 2 pads similar to what I've done here with these walls here. So you'd end up having a pad here, and there may be another pad inside like that, and then you just triangulate, and it depends on whether you want to divide it all up into little tiny areas, but at the moment you wouldn't be able to have a hole in there. No reason why we can't investigate that to be able to do that, but at this stage here it'd just be a triangulation, with one on the top, and knowing the other one was just slightly away from it. But it's sort of tweaked my interest a bit. There might be some ways that we can do other than creating 2 or 3 separate pads.
Great. And Min in Melbourne has asked a question here that it's a little bit complicated, so I'll read it out live, and if it's too complicated to answer live,
Okay,
then we'll email. So subdivision drawings require text showing existing surface level, ESXX.XX, and finished surface, FSXX, on all lot corners. Is there a way to automate this and rotate text parallel to the line?
well, it wouldn't be part of the pad option here. As I said, these are sort of like construction type viewing displays options. Even though they do look good, there's no option to put some suffix in front of here and so forth. But there is the labeling option, so you can go under File, Label Map File. I'm not going to run into this at the moment to show you where it is. So there's actually a string attribute property. So this allows you to, I've got one somewhere, maybe library, use library, no. So this will allow you to label things like the property of a string, its Z value, height, and so forth, and you can define what angle they're at and so forth. So they don't adjust for the angle of this, but they would just put a bit of text out like that on the side. And in here you can put a prefix saying EX or whatever you may want. But there is a video on this in the What's New version 12 that we did, but there is also a help option on this feature as well, and it will then take you into the process on how to use them and what all these options do mean. But as far as the pad option doing that, no, it doesn't. So you have to look at that labeling option as an external thing rather than the pad option trying to do it for you.
Matt in Melbourne's just come through with, can you put 2 pads on one block?
Yes, as we discussed before with Ben, it's just a matter of really just creating the actual two pads. So if there was a fairly large drive up here, for instance, and say 1 in 6, and then you wanted this pad to sit like this, so you could have a pad that was L-shaped like that. So you could do that pad, and this one here could be this pad here, could be a 1 in 6 drive up to here. So it's just how you want to create the pad. You got to think about it as a surface, and if you're able to create an L shape, the pad option will work happily with that. Obviously, it has to have at least three points, but the whole process would be to just create and treat them as individual surfaces that would relate to each other at certain points. So if you had a ramp coming up to here, then obviously the points here and here would be the same on the ramp as they would be on the other pad.
Wonderful. Thank you, Peter, and thanks to the audience for your great questions. Peter, if you've got that slide there that's got the about the upcoming training courses. So we've got some courses coming up in Brisbane, Melbourne, and Perth. And there's a handout available for download from this webinar outlining what's in the courses. You can register through the training page of our website or contact us by email for more information. The recording of this webinar will be available in coming days through our website and our YouTube channel. Our next 2 training webinars are 12D Model Design Absolute Basics on the 14th of March and Recording Chains for Surveyors on the 22nd of March. So feel free to sign up for those through our website as well as for our great upcoming industry solutions topics. We'll keep you posted on those and more through email and social media if you're subscribed. And if you need to contact us in the meantime, you can always visit our website. That concludes our presentation for today. Thank you all for attending, and we hope to see you at future webinars.